Welcome to Football Geeks. My guest today is a guy with a passion for football shirts, and he's transposed all that passion into a new book he's written, Pretty Polly, an authoritative guide to the history of the football shirt, explored in all of its kaleidoscopic glory. Alex, hello.
Hi, Phil. Thanks very much for the invitation.
You're very welcome, mate. You're very welcome. I've got my hands on a copy of the book. I don't know if you can see because it
Just
does
about bits of it.
yeah, this
I know
background
pretty well by now.
Well, that was my first error. That background just won't take anything other than kind of like human form, mate. But I can guarantee I've got the book. I've read the book, and it's utterly fantastic. So well done. It's a real triumph, mate. But first off, and this is a question that you've probably been asked numerous times in your promotion of the book, but I'm going to ask it again anyway because it's an important one. So, what spurred your passion for the humble football shirt?
I think it was in the 90s. So I this caveat I give and think on every interview that I am a Manchester United fan, as I've caveated with you before, but I have always had an M postcode. So that's my kind of justification for it. But my dad started taking me to United in 92, 93, which is pretty fortunate timing as a United fan. But then as a kind of impressionable teen, you really caught up as we started to get a lot more access to European football as things like the Champions League became more readily available on TV. You had things like Serie A, the Football Italia coverage. Sky Sports did La Liga, and all of a sudden all these kind of much more glamorous leagues were coming in there, because I suppose modern day Premier League fans might not know the story so well, but now we see the De Bruyne's and all these like fantastic leading players, Haaland, etc. They all play a lot, or a lot of them play in the Premier League, but that wasn't the case. It was really kind of parochial. You know, you'd have a token few Scandinavian players littered throughout each squad, but it was really UK and Irish and Scandinavian. And so you suddenly start seeing Brazilians, Argentinians, Italians, you know, people from countries all over the world, and it just seems kind of impossibly glamorous. So I really fell in love with European football, and I think that European club football is something that's really stuck with me. You know, at the top end, the Champions League, UEFA Cup, Cup Winners' Cup, now sadly lost, but that, and then as part of wanting to kind of recreate that, there was the idea of, you know, you started with the internet being able to, if you were lucky, get your hands on the strips. And so if you go into play five-a-side on a Friday, you know, why not dress up like Guy Comendieta or Edgar Davids and, you know, try and fail to do all the skills that they were doing on Nike videos and so on. So that's it. And then they sort of collected them, collected them up. Hadn't really done much about it, and then a few years ago, like you, started writing a bit about football kits in particular, and then it kind of snowballed as you get to learn more of the stories on their own. You realize there's something here, all these different elements of it that could kind of come together in one story, and here we go a couple of years later.
Oh, that's fantastic, mate. Yeah, you're right in regards to the when we were kids, we didn't have the shirt. Or actually, we did. We had like, but it was like Admiral and Umbro. They were the two specific brands, and I had like an England shirt and a Scotland shirt. For some reason, I got my hands on like a Southampton Admiral shirt and the old Man U away shirt with the kind of like black lining down the one side.
Yeah.
Gorgeous shirts. But I mean, we'll go into that era in a bit more detail when we talk about shirts. But you're right, wearing that shirt at five-a-side really kind of evokes that inner Ronaldo or inner Mendieta, as you say. So yeah. It's that's the magic of the football shirt, really, isn't it? Yeah. So in prior to us coming on air, we discussed 5 of shirts that you've chosen, not necessarily your favourite shirts, but the ones that you think had the most influence on the history of the football shirt. Alex, would you like us to talk us through those 5?
Yeah. So there's a few, and again, anybody who's read the book or sort of seen bits about it, there are these kind of different elements. It's separated into the chapters about these different things that build up the shirt. So there's the shirt itself, there's the sponsor, the colors, the replica industry, all these things. And I tried to sort of pick a few out that were really key in each of those elements. So the first one, and my pronunciation, I have to apologize in advance, but is Eintracht Braunschweig, their 1973 shirt. So people will know it from that iconic image with Paul Breitner in the shirt. So there were a few attempts at football team sponsorship, actually going back to the 1910s with some American teams, but really it was in the 1970s that this became kind of much more common. And the first really kind of iconic one was with this Eintracht Braunschweig. So they had the idea to reach out for sponsorship with a local liquor, which everybody will know much more readily now. Jägermeister obviously become much more popular. And so there were various sort of twos and fro's, like many aspects of the football kits. The German authorities were really reluctant to see this kind of traditional shirt besmirched with a commercial logo. So they had to change the team's emblem to this logo to sort of get this through. And there was various kind of toing and froing, and eventually they appeared in March 73 with this logo. And again, that sort of snowballed from them. I think of Kettering Town were one of the first in the UK. I think Liverpool, Hitachi, Hafner and Everton. And then nowadays you're talking maybe £50 million for a front of shirt sponsor for one of the big teams. But yeah, Braunschweig, that was the first really prominent sponsor.
Yeah, because I mean, the if you think of Jägermeister, now we have all the Red Bull teams, and obviously that's turned into a combination in itself. Yeah. That's in and around bars of big cities every Friday, Saturday, possibly Sunday night as well, if you're feeling a little bit cheeky and not worrying about work on Monday. But yeah, it's that was the brainchild of their CEO. Did you? I don't know if you know this story. I found it out by doing a little bit of research pre-show, and he was a guy called Gunter Mast, and he was the Jägermeister CEO. And he got the idea whilst watching England versus West Germany in the 1972 European Championships, and he had a light bulb moment and thought, "Hang on, how many people in Germany are watching this game?" And that's how the idea of kind of transposing Jägermeister's name onto the Braunschweig. I think my pronunciation is that horrible. I don't know, but the Braunschweig.
We're doing it wrong in different ways. Somewhere between the middle.
At least we're both wrong, though. That's it's a reassuring wrongness there. Yeah, so that's where that came from. So yeah, and he started an absolute phenomenon, didn't he? As you say, there's the Kettering Tires shirt with Derek Dugan. I recall that picture. But that was the first real kind of like corporate branding that we saw on a football shirt, wasn't it? So moving on, that's a great one, Alex. But moving on to your second one, who have you chosen as your second kit of significance to the football shirt genre?
Well, like you said, you as a kid, it was kind of this genesis of the replica kit industry. So even up to the 1960s, you could get an Umbro kit, but essentially it was a red kit or a blue kit or a striped kit, and there was nothing to really tie it to your club, because that's what the players wore. Because until it came to a cup final or a similar kind of big match, most clubs wouldn't even have an emblem on, so they'd just be the shirt numbers. So then you have Admiral, this Leicestershire firm that used to make underwear, and then they branched out into initially subcontracting for football firms like Umbro, and then decided to make their own copyrighted designs. So the idea was, rather than having a generic red shirt, if you put some details in that make it club specific, then under some new copyright laws, that can be your design and people can't copy it. And so you have to come to Admiral and to Leeds United, as it was, who were their first team that they signed up, to get a genuine item, so that kids in the playground wouldn't give you jip about it. And previously it'd been just that teams would buy the gear, they wouldn't be paid really, which seems strange now given the sums that Adidas and Nike and so on pay, but they wouldn't be paid, and actually they generally wouldn't get it from the firms. It would be from kind of local independent sports stores. So actually the first time that England wore an Umbro shirt, it wasn't actually badged as Umbro, because the outfitter that had supplied it had removed that tag and sort of put their own there. So it's a bit of a change, that idea that Admiral then came in the middle and actually paid Leeds for the right to have, you know, this trademark and to produce their kits for them, and then, you know, that make it profitable that way. So yeah, birth of a whole replica industry that now is, you know, hundreds of millions, billions of pounds a year, and actually is a really big and important kind of contribution to finance of football clubs. So I think we said when we were talking earlier, it was about sort of 30% of Arsenal and Chelsea's turnover is from football kits, whether it's that Adidas or Nike supply deal or the sponsor. And that's because Admiral decided to make those replica kits and to sell a defined design.
That's fantastic. Yeah, and we're talking specifically about the away kit, aren't we? The Leeds away kit of 1973-74 season.
Yes. So the home followed sort of shortly after, but it was kind of, you know, dip the toe in the water with the away kit first of all, and hopefully the fans a little less aggrieved, a little less attached to the away shirt.
Yeah, I think because at the start of that season they were still contracted to Umbro. So the home kit they wore was the Umbro Leeds home kit, and then I think the story is 3 employees were at a conference from Admiral, were at a conference in Leeds, and they dropped by the Leeds training ground on the way back to have a little look, and got speaking to Don Revie and said, Don, any chance of us kind of dipping our toe into your kind of your kit supply stream? And he said yes, and that's where the kind of like custard yellow away kit that Leeds wore during that season stemmed from.
I think Revie later picked up some UAE dollars, didn't he? So he's fully ahead of the commercialization of football.
Well, yeah, definitely. He wasn't adverse to making money from the game by not just managing. No, he was entrepreneurial in that sense. So,
Yeah.
but back in those days, it wasn't perceived as entrepreneurialism. It was perceived as a different animal entirely. Yeah, but I mean, funnily enough, the actual Leeds kit tied in with a kind of advent of colour television as well, because so when Leeds first appeared in that away kit on television, it was their 3rd game of the season. They were away at Tottenham, and they put in a scintillating display and won 3-0, and they were wearing these kind of gorgeous custard yellow kits, which became, everybody wanted one then, and that's the story. That's how, you know, another story in the history of the football shirt, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, that's how so many kits have defined themselves, haven't they? Is those kind of moments on pitch, which is obviously the best reason to make a kit successful, is that somebody's really inspired you by how well team or a player's played.
Yeah, and moving on. Well, the next shirt in your kind of rolling history definitely kind of ticks all those boxes. Do you want to talk us through that one, because there's a great story attached?
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose many fans kind of lament the cost, the ever increasing cost. It's been going on since, well, actually since the 1970s, when people would complain about the cost of football shirts. And we think
Hi,
You're
Alex. So we return. We had a little technical hitch there,
yeah,
but return. Yeah,
take two.
yeah. And we're heading into the. We talked about a shirt that's iconic in the sense that a performance of a player in this particular tournament is what brought that shirt to the kind of forefront of attention. Do you want to go into that story for us, mate?
Yeah, so the idea, again, as I said, you know, we worry about how expensive shirts are nowadays. You might pay 110, 120 quid for a replica authentic shirt, but this is a shirt that went for 7.1 million pounds at auction last year, and that's Diego Maradona's 1986 World Cup shirt. And understandably, you know, you can think of why the price is so high. Probably, my mind, that, you know, the best player of all time, it may be the best or most iconic performance of all time, because you've not just got that wonderful goal from inside his own half where he dribbled past the whole team, but you've also got the hand of God goal. So it's those, like, the angel and the devil elements of Maradona perfectly meshed in one match. So yeah, just shows that kind of the importance of this collectors, you know, how important these shirts can be, and what important kind of elements of football nostalgia that they are for people, how people feel about them. And also, as we talked about, you know, the idea that moments and players can really make the importance of a kit. And it's quite funny when we think about kind of fake kits and authenticity and so on. Actually, this was a completely inauthentic kit. So the story goes that the Argentinian team was supplied with a kind of rather quite a warm away kit for this Mexico World Cup. So it's very, you know, very hot conditions. And the day before, they just decided they couldn't play in this against England. It was going to be too hot in the heat of the day. And so the team manager was dispatched to the local town to scour all these different sports shops and find a football shirt for them. And all they could find was this, you've seen it, the sort of blue shirt, obviously not an official kind of Lecoq Sportif, who were the suppliers. And the only thing you could find, obviously they needed numbers for the back, were these American football numerals, so completely different to the usual ones they'd wear. And so they spent an evening, they'd found some local seamstresses to busily unpluck the embroidery, put the badge on these new shirts. They pressed these American football numbers on, and that's what they had, and that's the shirt that they played in, won in. And to think that just some kind of knockoff gear that you found in a backstreet sports shop is, just as you said, because of who wore it and what happened when they wore it, is worth £7 million. And I suppose also there's the provenance, isn't it, that we know about the England player who swapped it right after the game, and they've been well known as the owner for the past sort of 30, 40 years. And so I think that's a huge element with shirts, is this idea, is this the genuine thing that appeared on the pitch? Whereas, you know, we've got a pretty amazing link back to kind of the dressing room 40 years ago.
Yeah, it's that perfect alliance of the shirt making history and history making the shirt, isn't it? It's the two kind of linking perfectly together. But it's also amusing to think that like a 50 peso shirt down downtown Mexico City has now raised 7 million. That's just incredible, isn't it?
You'll have to clear out your wardrobe and see what you've got looking around at the back of.
I've actually got my friend Irvin, who's an Albanian guy. He sent me a shirt, and it was worn in an Albanian international against Montenegro. And the winning, if you have a look at it, the game was around 2014, but there is YouTube coverage, and they won 3-2. And the shirt that I've got is the shirt that's worn by the winning goal scorer, and the goal is incredible. It's like an overhead kick from the edge of the box, and it just flies in. And that shirt's in my wardrobe in my house. So yeah, another history attached to a football shirt story.
Yeah, fantastic. Given the book as well, that's
yeah. He's one hell of a guy. He helped me put together my book, which is coming out next year. But we won't talk. We're talking about your book at the moment. We'll save that for another occasion, mate, because we have talked about it. So moving on 2 years from 1986, we're heading into kind of new territory, and a shirt that really influenced the kind of coming era, didn't it?
Yeah, so by the 1980s, although you got this retail replica industry coming up, still there's some elements of design that are coming in. You know, the Coventry tram lines and things like that. And you mentioned the stripes down the United shirt, but it's still not what we had in the 90s. But there were a couple of technical innovations. So we got these jacquard weaving machines. So if you've ever seen, there's parts that aren't printed in a shirt where it's like the weave changes to make a pattern, and that's called a jacquard. And these electronic machines allowed you to put them in quite easily. So you start seeing the mid 90s, there was a mid 80s, there was a Liverpool shirt, 85 or so, that had a Liver bird and an Adidas logo kind of woven in. And the other part of it was being able to print the shirts. They had these sublimation printing machines that could print really complex patterns. And a couple of the first that have become really iconic are the West Germany 88 to 90, and the one we're talking about, which is this Netherlands 88 shirt, which Ruud Gullit described as looking like fish scales. People will recognize it. It was you know, one of the most famous shirts I think of all time. So the shirt Van Basten scored his wonderful volley from near the corner flag. And I suppose there's a couple of elements of it. Is again, it's one of those first really kind of quite complex and dramatic designs, and it set off this period, particularly in the 90s, where the designs were, you know, were very creative and very, very distinctive. There's also this criticism that a lot of football fans have of the idea of a template, that people don't like receiving a facsimile of other teams' kit, which was the case particularly in the sort of 90s and 2000s. But actually, this is a template, and the same shirt pattern was used for a whole host of teams, you know, including the likes of USA, West Germany as well. So Argentina. So, you know, not all templates are evil. You get a good one like that, and it's really just a good shirt design, even if others have it. Yeah, so I think those are kind of the two elements. And then I suppose the final bit maybe is being one of the earliest replica shirts, or in that early phase, and being such a popular design, the prices are through the roof. So you're talking about £700, £800, £1,000 maybe to get a replica version, not even a match worn shirt.
Wow.
So again, just showing that, particularly the last few years, you know, how much interest and therefore kind of demand and prices for even replica shirts sold at JJB Sports. You know, then you now add a zero onto the previous price.
Yeah, I mean, and it opened a whole door for sublimated kits, didn't it? I remember about 2 seasons later, in the J League, virtually every team was wearing a shirt of you know, that had sublimation of some sort on it. So it really did open the door for it. You know, and there was Arsenal as well, as you say, and like England kits of the away kit of 1990. But moving on, we'll move on to the fifth and final shirt in our potted history of the football shirt. Which one are you opting for now, Alex?
Yeah, so I've gone for a home question, if we're talking question of sport. So I've gone for my own beloved Manchester United, and this is the third shirt from the start of the Umbro contract, so 92 to 94, when Umbro took over from Adidas again and started making it. And people will recognise it instantly when I mention it as the Newton Heath kit, so this green and yellow kit. And again, I mention it for a few reasons. So we kind of lament it now, this almost all pervasive aspect of retro inspired designs, which seem to kind of dominate design thinking now. But that was quite original. There've been a lot of teams were coming up to their centenary. So I think Derby were one of the first, maybe 88, 87 to do an earlier kit. But it was really quite novel to sort of take some of your history and use that as the inspiration. And United obviously did that with that design. And actually it turns out, like many of these things, because you're relying on black and white photography, they definitely wore yellow and green, and they definitely had like a halved shirt, but the two supposedly didn't match up. So it's actually kind of a, you know, artistic creation of Umbro in reality. So those are kind of important elements. And then I think the other bit is, again, this sense of belonging and how much people are attached to their colors and what they can mean, because, you know, that's not quite a throwaway design, but it's a creative one-off design that hasn't been seen since, but yet that's become the protest colours for a whole club and its whole kind of fandom in terms of, you know, their campaign against owners that they're not particularly fond of. And, you know, amazing to think that just a kind of quite simple design can be taken on and become really dear to fans' hearts.
Yeah, it's a football kit as a symbol, as you've said. It's now become part of that kind of anti-culture, hasn't it? So, a fantastic shirt. I actually absolutely loved it. I remember in the city at the time. I'm a Birmingham City fan. Villa had a kit with that similar kind of shoelace neck as well.
The round neck,
yeah. And I hated to admit that I really liked that kit as well, because at the time our kits, well, there's been a kind of rebirth in the Birmingham City shirt with the orange and green kind of paint on the front. But at the time, I thought that was wretched. And you looked over to the other side of the city and you saw a team that were wearing a really cool kit. So yeah. Anyway, so moving on, we're going to stay on the subject of Manchester United, because before we started the conversation in the weeks leading up, I've tasked you with coming up with your 3 worst ever Manchester United games. So yeah, I'm going to take you down the dark corridors of history, and you're going to, I know this is going to be painful for you, but you know, it's also cathartic as well. So
yeah.
So yeah, 3 games, 3 of your worst ones, Alex. Do you want to tell us about the first one in that horrible trio?
Yeah, so I suppose there's a caveat before that I do recognise that. I imagine in contrast to many fans that you've had on who've had games where perhaps they could have gone out of existence, got relegated, you know, things like that. It is very much first world problems when you're, you know, I've been supporting United for 31 seasons, and we've never finished lower than 7th in the Premier League. So I do recognise that people might not perhaps appreciate my complaints, but that considered, I think the first one is being completely outplayed by Barcelona in the Champions League final of '99. And I could actually do a 2-for-1 of having sort of 2011, you know, we'd won the Champions League in 2008. We had a wonderful team. They were, I think, maybe my favourite United team. They were just sort of, they're in Fergie's mould, but in a very different way to that team of the 90s, which was, you know, McClare and Hughes and Ince and Keane, who were sort of old school footballers, but with quality. It was different, but it still had like just this ferocious aggression. You know, you think of Ronaldo as he was, not the penalty box poacher, but just like a force of nature, really. And the same with Rooney and Tevez as those kind of like twin devils. And you just think the idea of seeing that trio in a lineup against you, you know, it's not only skill, but it's just that, that aggression, that tenacity, that never say die attitude. And we had some wonderfully skillful players in midfield. The underrated Carrick, Anderson when he was still in good fitness. We had Paul Scholes as well, but just totally decimated. And again, to see this, maybe the best team of your lifetime, just completely made to look like a team a league below it, on the highest sort of stage as well, was really kind of chastening memory.
Yeah, it was and also the kind of the start of the recognition of Pep Guardiola as an incredible coach. I remember on the day of the game, I was at work, and it was virtually kind of a stick on that Manchester United were going to win. It's ridiculous to think that now, but at the time it was like, yeah, Man U will win this. But I remember saying on the day that game is going to be decided in midfield, and what incredible midfield does Barcelona had. Obviously, they were the fulcrum of the side that won the European Championship in 2008 and went on to win the World Cup in 2010, and this kind of showed the progression, didn't it? It was and they just won it in midfield, and as Spain have gone on to do so many times since then.
Yeah, and you know, again, like United, that homegrown core to have had Messi and Xavi and Iniesta and Busquets and Gerard Piqué and goalkeeper Valdez, it was name temporarily escaped me there. It was Bojan, I think, on the fringes, just threatening to break in. So had probably half the team that were Pedro in the second, I think.
Yeah.
You know, a really good core. So it's not just a case of sort of the Galacticos across the other side of Spain, but a real kind of homegrown team as well.
Yeah, that's the difference between Real and Barca, isn't it? Barca seem to be almost entirely organic. So moving on, we're going to, thanks for sharing that one, horrible as it was. But we'll move on to game 2, and it's not going to get any better. I don't suspect going into this one, mate. It can only go downhill from here.
Yeah, I suppose it's 3 humiliations, which I suppose is kind of an obvious choice. But yeah, it's the 6-1 against Manchester City in 2011, and really kind of signalled the change of the guard and the change of the kind of power balance in the city. That United have been top dogs. Certainly, obviously, in my lifetime, City were a mid Premier League team, and then obviously went to second tier and the third tier even, and just they weren't playing, you know, in the same kind of stratosphere. And then this money came in, and even then it sort of looked like it was being spent very aimlessly, and then it was spent a bit more sensibly, and you know, they came up on the rails very, very quickly. And yeah, it doesn't get much more humiliating than a 6-1 defeat, and it's still sort of talked about, still mentioned on a probably weekly, monthly basis by City fans. So yeah, really, it's that power change that really they were, you know, there was parity in the city at least.
Yeah, and there was the Mario Balotelli "Why Always Me" T-shirt, wasn't there, underneath his? But it was an odd game because it was I think it was 1-0 at half time, and the game had no kind of you couldn't see the game going that way. But then shortly after half time, I think someone got sent off for Man U, didn't they? It was Johnny Evans. Johnny Evans got sent off in the 47th minute. Or shortly after half time, anyway. And then Man City raced into like a 3-0 lead, and Man U pulled one back. But then they were like bang, 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 3 goals in the last 2 minutes of the game, where I think Man U were pushing numbers forward to chase it, and that's what made the result so awful. Whereas as if they'd just gone, okay, let's just leave it at this and keep it at 3-1, and
we've done that a few times. Like, you know, the Liverpool 7-0 last season.
Yeah.
It could have quite easily been it's still a horrible result, 2 or 3-0. But there's something that unwisely, you could say it's to our credit to keep chasing and never give up, but it just becomes sort of like the kind of the Alamo that teams just taking pot shots, and it's happened quite a lot over the last few years.
Yeah, I think it's in Man U's DNA to keep chasing, isn't it? To keep going and see what happens. But it didn't work to their credit that day. And we're going to talk about another of those awful days when everything goes wrong. But in this one, they weren't chasing the game. Something else happened that day. Maybe you can describe it better for me. What happened on that day in this final game?
Yeah, well, I was there. So this was 2021. We played Liverpool. I think we were either 3 or 4-0 down by half time, and again, like City, you know, I suppose it'd already been pretty clear that Liverpool were top dogs, but it was just this kind of demonstration of how far we were behind. And I suppose it was more painful, really, because we were fortunate that we'd had this club legend come in, and actually when Ole Gunnar Solskjaer came in after the kind of misery that you can imagine, the tail end of a Mourinho period in charge is never a pleasant time. And
No.
after that, kind of Ollie came in and hits that nostalgia button, you know, square on, and we were fantastic. You know, we had a great start. It was such a joy to watch. But then obviously his kind of limitations became more apparent, and no more so than this game. So yeah, we ended up losing 5-0, and we'd had this fantastic chant to it was the Stone Roses Waterfalls. So Ollie's at the wheel, originally Jose's at the wheel. And fans really took to it. You know, it's sort of a Manchester identity. It's a great tune. It was a good little kind of ditty, but it was ruined forever. I don't think I've heard it since. That the Liverpool fans, after about 50-60 minutes, started singing Ollie's at the wheel as well. And that's sort of, you know, it's not only that your beloved club legend turns out not to be good enough to lead you, but also that he and your club are getting mocked really, really badly. So yeah, just again, it's that against the most hated of enemies, just being utterly outclassed. You know, they eased up really for a good 35 minutes. It was still 5 goals.
Yeah, and then having your favourite anthem besmirched by the perennial foe as well. Awful, mate. Well, you know, I'm sorry for making you feel like this and putting you through this. But as you say, you are in that privileged hierarchy of fans.
Absolutely.
And I talked about it in previous podcasts. 90% of football fans, their entire existence is lived in a state of abject misery, and you're lucky enough to be born in a postcode where that isn't so. So at least, as I say, this is cathartic for you. You can go on and enjoy all the fabulous things that are going to happen to Man U in the future, and you've now set these demons to rest.
Yes.
Well, Alex, mate, thank you for speaking to us. It's been great talking. So Pretty Polly, the book, where is it available, mate? Where can people get their hands on a copy of this fantastic new book of yours?
Yeah, so it's available online and in bookstores. If you are looking for it on the internet, I realized in hindsight that there is a slight tie-in with the underwear manufacturer by using the name Pretty Polly. So if you are hunting on Google, if you put Alex Ireland in there or Pretty Polly, the history of the football shirt, that'll help you narrow it down a bit more quickly. But yeah, available online, available in bookstores. Again, you can follow me. I'm sort of posting bits out from it. So it's Alex D Ireland on Instagram and Twitter, and I'm often posting about the book, little excerpts, little kind of stories and threads of some of the things that have come out of it.
That's fabulous, mate. That's fabulous. So remember, buy the book, otherwise you could have a surprise landing on your doorstep in the not too distant future. Well, thank you, mate. It's been great. Your insight and knowledge today has been fabulous. And thanks for being a guest.
Oh, great. Well, thanks for the invitation. Great to chat to you about it.
You're very welcome, mate. It's always a pleasure. So join me next time on Fussball Geeks for more amazing stories told by fabulous guests. See you next time. Bye-bye.